Start the recording. Hello and welcome to this week's NORA Startup webinar. This is the first webinar of 2021. In this week's webinar, we will look into the future. In 2020, as we all know, we all experienced a tremendous digital shift, and AI played a pivotal role. At the same time, the ICT field flourished with AI-driven innovation, and 2021 will be a year full of additional AI opportunities. And today we will learn what these opportunities are. This year's first NORA Startup webinar will explore some of these opportunities, and we will learn how Norwegian startups could seize and become thriving AI companies. We have with us Anders Bryhni from Sintef Digital and Valeriya Naumova from Simula, who both will share their views on which possibilities within AI they believe it is worth looking into in 2021, and which areas in the industry we expect to see AI put into use. We also have with us NORA's CEO, Klas Pettersen, who will bring interesting insight into the possibilities within AI, health, and data sharing. So this webinar is a plenary discussion first, and after we have some introductory tone, and we will learn about these AI opportunities. So my name is Morten Gudvin, and I will be the facilitator today. And it is a webinar that is meant to be highly interactive. That means if you have questions in general or questions specifically to each of these participants, you're more than welcome to use the chat. We actually very much encourage you to use the chat. So today we will first get a brief introductory talk from each of the participants, Valeriya, Anders, and Klas, and then we will continue with the panel debate. So first, to give a talk, I welcome Anders Bryhni, who is a senior business developer at Sintef Digital. So hello, Anders.
Hello, Morten, and thanks for inviting me to this session.
Would you like to tell us about the opportunities for 2021?
Yeah, I'll try to do that. So my name is Anders Bryhni. I work in Sintef, and I'm responsible for our strategic initiative on digitalization. And I'm leading what we call AI at Sintef, which is sort of an umbrella across all the work we do on AI in different domains. And it gives a pretty good view of what the people we talk to are interested in. My own background is in cybernetics, and I now spend the majority of my time on business development. And in Sintef, we work with customers all the way from startups to large corporates. Topics reaching from data sharing, optimization, machine learning, computer vision to stuff like robotics and visualization. So we really see like the full value chain. A success story we're really proud of these days is the long and good collaborations that we've had with Spacemaker, which has been through a very exciting journey over the last few years. So I hope that among you guys who are listening in today, we have people with similar passion and interest and sort of a readiness for building cool tech in Norway. So today's topic is which opportunities AI startups should seize in 2021. And I think it's at least three perspectives that are important. The first one is sort of where is the market, right? What megatrends are we seeing today? And if you want customers, you really want to see where is money flowing. EU today, with its Green Deal, it's aiming at boosting efficient use of resources. It's caring about circular economy, restoring biodiversity, and cutting pollution. And also looking at the Norwegian political and policy scene, we have strategies and work on stuff like offshore wind, hydrogen, electrification, and carbon capture. So a lot of money is going to flow into these segments, and I think we'll see a lot of really bustling activity in so many of these value chains in the years to come. So what will sort of people and organizations be looking for, and how do we think that AI can help? Well, I think it's a lot of stuff we can do. I mean, looking all the way from production cost of equipment to how to run operations more efficiently, You have to look at market solutions, you have to look at ways to get transparency and so on. And I think a common theme here is that it's applications of AI that is a little bit away from what has traditionally been the big sort of focus area, which has very much been on, say, consumer solutions and B2C stuff. So that's the first one. The second part is I would look at ecosystems. We live in a very networked economy, and I think it's more important than ever to see where you're offering, if you're a startup, where does it fit into an sort of overall landscape. So I think that very often when we talk about an AI startup or an AI company, actually the say the algorithm part, the number crunching part, is a fairly limited piece of the overall picture. So sort of trying to figure out where you fit into the overall story for organization or for a market, I think is important. So a cool example, I think, is what's called is a company called Diffia. You might have heard of that. That's in the health sector, so you might hear more about that later today. They have a product called Nimble Clinic, and yeah, it does contain sort of aspects of AI, but the overall story is that it sort of makes the everyday life and communication for clinicians more easy, to make a more seamless experience. So AI is helping, but it's just part of the overall story. In more industrial settings, which is sort of my home turf, we see a growing number of data platforms, systems, marketplaces for bridging this sort of operational technology, operational world with the more traditional IT aspects of things. So if you are to succeed on that scene, I think understanding where you fit into this platform play is really, really crucial. So you might have heard of platforms like Veracity from DNV, CDF from Cognite, and Cognify from Kongsberg. And all of these players, I think you need to see it as part of the canvas that you can play on. Another example is from agriculture, where a lot of distributed producers, they interact with government, with equipment vendors, with buyers, and it's such a fragmented market. So if you, with an AI solution, want to really solve problems, you need to make sure that you don't become like one more system that is just living on its own, right? It needs to integrate. It needs to really be part of an overall story. And the same thing you'll see if you move closer to the consumer markets. So examples that the EU is looking at quite a lot is energy and groceries. And if you want a more sort of connected digital approach, you need to make sure that customers, or if you want to use a more digital approach to make customers do sustainable choices, you really need to make sure that what you do fit into both sort of the back end and the story all the way back to producers, but also that it fits into the ecosystem that the consumers see every day. So the third and final perspective I want to mention is sort of what's happening on the technical scene that is the most relevant today. I mean, it's so much interesting stuff happening out there, and it's really hard to guess at what will be the big thing 3 or 5 years from now. But the people I talk to, it's some things that they point to and talk about that we think is relevant in the relatively short term, and at least pointing back to the kind of markets that I mentioned. At least one thing we talk about a lot in Sintef is that in order to make machine learning work well on physical systems where you have time series and sensor data, you really need your algorithms to behave in another way than in many of these, say, internet applications. So design of algorithms that is better suited for this sort of mixed hybrid analytics between data-driven and physics-driven models. We think this is really a crucial part of implementing both production optimization and stuff like predictive maintenance. Another thing that you'll hear a lot about is reinforcement learning. Obviously, there has been some huge successes in games and game-like situations. It's really fascinating, but at the same time, it's challenging to apply that to real-world situations. But now, over the last year, we've seen some developments where we can sort of find real world situations that behave a little bit more like gaming, right? So one topic we looked quite a lot at is energy trading. How do you make these electricity markets work, and moving from there into hydropower production planning. So I think that for companies that want to specialize in reinforcement learning, there is sort of real life things to look at. You just have to spend some time looking for it. Language was briefly mentioned, I think. Language models for Norwegian language, it's definitely on the rise. A lot of exciting things happening. I think that's going to be huge fairly soon. And the final point is sort of technology for transparency, both on the data side and on algorithms. I think some people seem to think that blockchain kind of is a magic wand that you can wave around to make systems more transparent. But I don't think that's the case. There's a lot of research going on explainability for algorithms these days, which is definitely developing, but it's still something that we need to evolve. And I think if you look at Spacemaker's story, for example, one of the learnings they've had along the way is that they need to design the overall system so that the sort of the user feels that it has a bit of a human touch, or a bit of a human-centric design. So I think I'll leave it there. Think about the megatrends, think about ecosystems, and look for technologies that can deliver value in the fairly short term. Thanks.
That was truly interesting, Anders. So one of the experiences I have previously was AI projects failing because the lack of label data. And many of the examples you used, like reinforcement learning, megatrends, these things don't really rely that much on label data, but maybe interaction in a system of that sort. So do you see that as a trend, the less need for labeling of big data sources?
I think labeling is definitely still a challenge, right? And when we I mentioned like machine vision, one of the things that sort of has made image recognition of cats and dogs, for example, quite simple, is
Right.
that it's fairly easy to find people who can sit down and manually tag a data set, right?
Yeah, most people know the difference between a cat and dog. That's
Yeah,
right. Yes.
quite a few do that. But if you look at more, say, practical use cases in sort of the areas I talked about, finding a person that can tag a data set and say, well, this is actually a rust or degradation that is bad, and this is not that bad. They don't walk around on the street, and you can't get hold of them for $5 an hour, right? It's so having data sets that you really need skilled people to label, that's definitely something that slows down development today. So yeah, still a lot of practical challenges in that respect.
True. And I experienced exactly what you said there also, but for fish, because obviously people know the difference between fish and cat and dog, but the specific types of fish you need a biologist to do. And that is the same, hard to label. So we look forward to listening more to you in the panel debate later. And we'd like to welcome Valeriya to give a short introduction to how she sees 2021 from Simula Consulting. So, Valeriya, what does 2021 look like from an AI perspective?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin, for introduction. Just a brief introduction for myself. My name is Valeriya Naumova. I'm working at Simula Consulting, which is a daughter company from the Simula Research Laboratory, which provides consulting services from ICT domains to public and private organizations on a commercial basis. My background is in applied mathematics and machine learning, and I have been working as a researcher till last year before I started to lead Simula Consulting, and I have been working at Simula. I've been working in machine learning domain, also leading machine learning department at Simula. And I still have several research projects working on developing machine learning methods for different application areas. One is in the healthcare domain, and one in the upskilling HR domain. In projects I have been working as a researcher, I've been working quite closely with problem owners and domain experts. So it was targeted towards the end users. Also putting ahead as a leader of Simula Consulting, and where we work more with companies of different sizes. So we both work with very early stage startups by doing essentially supporting them and giving assessment of their ideas on how feasible, how scalable they are. And we see that there are a bunch of startups coming and claiming that they're doing AI and machine learning. And then we see what's actually they're doing, up to the more medium sized companies and actually large industries who are interested in implementing machine learning in their everyday workflows to automate them and also to make them more efficient and optimize many of them. So I will be talking today from these two perspectives. As a researcher, looking at, okay, what are advances in the research which allow us to push forward machine learning? Because always as researchers, we try to save the world and we say that our technology is the best one in the world. So looking at that, but also looking more from practical perspective, from industry perspective, and seeing how feasible it is, and then trying to combine those 2 points of view to give you an idea, at least on which areas seems to be promising for 2021. And I also hope that this will continue in the following years. And finally, I will try to give you some kind of hints or tips on what to look when you try to start your company or implement your idea from essentially from idea to innovation and to real life application. Because even though it sounds easy, that you can essentially experience a lot of roadblocks which needs to be overcome, and it's always much better to know about them. But I would like to start with really kind of on a high note, saying that as we all know that the machine learning domain and the machine learning industry is flourishing right now. So if one looks in the Crunchbase, which is the database with all the companies, one can find that there are around 10,000 startups working on machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is a 15% increase from 2019. And if one looks also at the amount of funding received by those startups, it's around $30 billion, which was received in 2020, according again to the Crunchbase data source. And even though this is a huge number, so if we look also at the distribution, where did this money go? We can also see that 62% of that money are essentially seed rounds, which means that those companies are very, very early stage, and 30% were early stage ventures. And only around 7% were late stage venture capital funded rounds. Meaning that it's essentially quite, yes, Martin, that's for Norway. And I think it's Norway and Europe, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. The 10,000 startups. So meaning that essentially there is a lot of funding going on and investment going on in early stage startups and early stage companies, and that people are trying to develop new technologies and deliver them. At the same time, if you think about startups versus kind of big companies, the focus of a startup quite often is on a very point solution. So your startups usually address a specific pain of a company or of society, whereas big companies are trying to develop more holistic and end-to-end models. So there is also this kind of a big trend of essentially that many startups which develop specialized solutions are being acquired by big companies to enhance their end-to-end models, which sounds quite good for many startups, as we also has been mentioned, Spacemaker or other startups, which develop one specific product and then being sold, or the exit is being acquired by a larger company and then develops a product to a larger stage. But let me just go and consider this essentially the expected development for this year from these three different domains: the field in general, research, and then trying to combine them to see what type of ideas are feasible for startups. So we all hear about AI, machine learning, bringing a lot of advances. And of course, we all expect breakthroughs, expected breakthroughs for 2021 and 2022. We all know about them. It's self-driving cars, pharmaceutical industry. We are hoping that machine learning will help to develop medicine and drugs in a much faster and cheaper way. Then we all heard about advances in natural language processing in the past 2 years, which led to the development of conversational AI and a lot of advances in chatbots, essentially personalized support, and also advances in e-commerce. More and more we hear about machine learning and artificial intelligence to be used for sustainable goals and green energy, essentially reducing the energy use and reducing poverty, reducing the hunger, how this machine learning can help, and definitely this field will be prioritized. Another aspect is hardware, development of chips which allow to perform more complex computations with larger amount of data. And last area, which we heard a lot in the past years, is the deep fake. There are more and more fake news popping up, and with using machine learning and artificial intelligence. So those are breakthroughs we all heard about from media, industry, and maybe saw some projects. And that's pretty much not surprising. If we are talking about from research perspective, we can think about the following areas where the breakthrough has been done. It's one, first of all, is natural language processing, image and signal processing. As Anders mentioned, more focus has been on explainable artificial intelligence. And the last part is tiny ML, which is essentially machine learning on IoT and edge devices, how to build resource-efficient machine learning. So if we combine these two perspectives, breakthrough from technology perspective and research perspective, what we can think about, what are the topics for startups to look into. So first of all, I would say, in general, development of tools for data integration, preparation, visualization that allow companies to obtain insights from their data, and also, as mentioned, data labeling. That's a huge thing is going to come, because more and more companies try to use machine learning, but unfortunately they do not know how to use it and what type of advances to bring. If one can help them to communicate how this can be essentially brought to the companies, how they can utilize machine learning, and in an easy way by having this streamlined pipelines, that would be extremely helpful. Another topic is, as also mentioned by Anders, is predictive maintenance, asset performance management. So everything which allows to build kind of digital twins of the solutions and do predictions on the products. Another topic which could be also extremely interesting is the logistics and supply chain. How can we optimize the delivery, reducing the number of kilometers spent on the delivery, but also essentially reducing transport costs and delivery of online products. So these are kind of topics what one can consider by essentially focusing on machine learning for 2021. And just quickly, one thing to mention is when creating companies, just always remember that you should have a domain expert or a end customer who will look into your product and very essentially close collaboration with them is essential for your product, as well as the availability of the data. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I will just stop here.
So thank you, Valeriya. That was truly interesting. And one of the things that blew my mind was how many startups that are actually claiming to be part of AI. 10,000, you said. So do you know about the AI techniques they're using? Is it more AI in the name, or are they trying to use the latest neural networks, for example? Do you have any overview of what type of AI techniques they're using?
So there is a variety of startups, but quite a lot of them are developing technologies for this general simplified use of AI by non-experts. Some others focusing on fraud detection or for fintech. So it's not only its name, but it's actually companies which are using these technologies. Yeah.
That warms an AI heart that we see so many companies trying to innovate in this. And I'm sure our next speaker, Klas Pettersen, will also agree. So many AI startups, but we don't have 10,000 in NORA, do we?
No, and I don't think that's the ambition either, because we want to be a high-level startup. I mean, research-based AI is what we really want to do in NORA.
That is true. And how do you see 2021?
It has happened a lot of interesting things in 2020, and I even have some slides. You asked me to prepare some slides or prepare something about also AI and health.
Please do.
So I will share my screen. I hope I will share my screen.
We see your screen, yes.
You see my screen? Okay. Possibilities of AI in health in Norway. And Martin, please interrupt me. I know I have too many slides and I'm sure I will go past my time. So please just ask me to stop. Actually, I have written also a piece in Tidsskriftet for Norske Legeforening not too far ago about kunstig intelligens vil endre helsetjenesten. So there I also write some of the things that I think will happen in the future. So please, you can find it, Google it, and you will find it. And the question, will it happen? Yes, and it is happening now. And in research, it's very clear. If you use PubMed, which is kind of the research database, especially for medicine, then you will see that the terms deep learning and machine learning, they are just like exponentially flying off now. So with a doubling of every 2.5 years. So these are terms that kind of are really popular in medicine. And I would also advise you, if you really want to dig a bit more into this topic, to read The Deep Medicine by Erik Toppel. It's a great book, and he also has written several papers that you could read, especially this one, High Performance Medicine, the Convergence of Human and Artificial Intelligence. So that's kind of advices to read if you're interested in this. In Norway, we have a lot of great research. I will just mention a few things, but all NORA partners and I mean have great research within AI and health. So this is Visual Intelligence, which is a new Center for Forskningsdrevet Innovasjon based in Tromsø, but also other partners, where as the title says, visual intelligence, it's about images, but a lot of it is about health. So this is kind of where you will see innovation happening also in Norway within this center. You have other centers that have done a lot with health in Big Insight, for example, which is also an SFI in Norway. So these are research-based innovation in Norway. I will also mention, because we had here earlier presentation of Geir, which is from Simula. This is an example where you have a colon cancer detection using AI with a lot of partners. So this is a similar thing. And one of the most exciting things I think happening last years in AI was this thing called AlphaFold. So this has been a long-term problem to find the shapes of proteins. And it's quite easy these days to kind of find sequences of molecules, amino acid sequence of a protein. But then from going from this long chain of amino acid and how this folds into a specific shape has been a great problem. And the shape is important. It's often, you have all seen this coronavirus now with the spike proteins, and these are proteins that binds them to other cells. So knowing these shapes and the physiology, how they work, is extremely important in medicine. And then just a month ago or so, this problem was more or less solved by DeepMind with their tool called AlphaFold 2. I will not have time to go too much into it, but given the amino acid sequence, they can predict the shape of the protein, which will then give us knowledge which can be used in medicine, medications, vaccines, and everything. I just want to mention one more thing. This is a project which is fairly large, but it is based on public available data. So we have a lot of research bases with data. So this is made from open data. The computing resources are not too huge. It's not like GPT-3 and stuff, which requires kind of the big companies to do this. This could actually be done in Norway if you had a good organization, and we need, of course, to collaborate and get the right insights and experts into this. So it would be a huge challenge, but it could, in principle at least, be done in Norway. So I find this could also be an interesting thing maybe to do, a kind of open tool for this, because DeepMind will I think not share this exciting tool. They will have to earn their money the coming years, I think, and I guess at least that this will be more or less closed for researchers or other companies. If you want to know more about it, Morten and I actually had the podcast with Inge Jonassen from the University of Bergen, who is a great expert on protein folding from Norway. And this trend then, all the data that we're gathering now, this was kind of the front page of the Apple websites not too long ago, with the Apple watches, other watches, also a lot of people doing running, for example, use tool that kind of record health data. So we will have a lot of health data, too much really to handle. So how to handle it is a big question. And of course, this could be useful information for your physician, but the physician don't want all your data. It's too much. So you need some kind of tools to get the right kind of information into your physician. And their artificial intelligence will be important. So I also expect this to be an exciting field using health data. I mentioned a lot of interesting research is going on. I think now is the time to kind of translate this great research we do in Norway and other countries from just being research and into the clinic, into the benefit for patients. You see good results in a lot of, for example, cancer screening, so detection of cancer in images, for example. But typically just in research, you have some challenges getting this out to the clinics, reproducing results on other tools in new hospitals, other machines, and so on. So you have some challenges, but you will see now that this is more and more used. And here is one recent example, actually the first one that was approved by the FDA in the US, which is a kind of blindness that you can get if you have diabetes. So now you can actually just take an image of your retina, and it will automatically just tell you if you're a potential candidate for this diabetes retinopathy. It can diagnose you actually with it. In Norway, I think health is of particular interest. We have some areas in Norway which are important and where we should be good. Health is definitely one of them. Ocean, mobility, energy, public administrations are the other ones, but health is definitely one of them. And one reason for that is our good research groups in Norway, but also not least our good health data. And you have some strategies here kind of pointing out the direction in Norway when it comes to health. And they are a very interesting reading. But the health data, one example is the cancer registry in Norway, which is more or less complete back to the mid-1950s. So this is kind of a gold mine. I think Norway could have a competitive advantage compared to other countries when it comes to AI in health. Yeah, I have a lot of slides. I know my time is almost running out, but some of these strategies, they kind of recommend more collaboration to find a good organization of how to organize AI and health. And it's quite much about combining helseforetak, your innovation environments, and research environments, of course, to try to get the ecosystem up and running. So NORA, we hope to take part in doing this. We hope to kind of take many of them interested contributors and to create this ecosystem. We will also apply for this for a so-called EDIH application from the EU system. So we are working with this, and a lot of interested partners are joining on this application. And I think this will, no matter how the application will turn out, this will be an interesting initiative in Norway anyway, I think. Yes, Morten, I know you. So then I will close it there. But again, take-home message. I think Norway has a competitive advantage in AI and health. We have so many good research groups, but we need this ecosystem, and we need to translate all this good research now to the hospitals, to the patients, to the benefit of for everyone.
So thank you, Klas, and we'll of course hear a lot more from you during the panel debate. But one thing that I noticed was that you specifically mentioned this AlphaFold example. So that's very exciting research, but it's interesting that you mentioned this in a startup talk. So how do you see a startup company or a small company benefiting from that type of technology?
No, my dream would be to have an open tool that could be used by many and also startup companies. Because if you could create a more open tool, this would really boost both the economy, but not at least it would be very important for patients. I mean, proteins are so important. Proteins are life, essentially, and they are also where you can kind of do things with medicines and so on. So we have so many also good biotechnology groups and companies and in Norway. So I think this would kind of fit Norway. So if anyone is interested and have finances to do such a project, just tell us.
Very good. So if Anders and Valeriya also can start their screen, we can see them, and then we'll start the debate. And I'd like to start with a more general question, and then we'll go into the questions that have come from the audience. But it's very exciting to jump on new opportunities. We see all these innovations that has happened in 2020. Natural language processing has mentioned one of Klas mentioned AlphaFold as one technique. So if you start the question with Anders, so how should we really know the difference between something that has the opportunity to, let's say, provide revenue versus something that is a little bit of a hype in the field? It's not so easy to understand what is the difference between something that is just cool and something that could really benefit society or economically ways. Anders.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a very it's a good question and not necessarily so easy to answer. I think sort of based both on our the research stuff we're doing and sort of practical things. I think finding users, I mean, a big problem, right? Either if you're a developer or a researcher or something, if you end up sitting on your own trying to figure out how things are going to be used, you're going to hit the wall at some point, right? So finding a user, a customer, whatever kind of, I mean, you need to solve something for someone, right? And getting that perspective as soon as possible. I think that's probably the best way to avoid just following the hype, right? Because it's so many cool things, but it's not necessarily easy to see how it's going to be applied.
And what about you, Valeriya? You that work maybe very close with startups. Do you see a lot of these startups trying to jump on hype, or is it more sound innovation that lies there?
There are a lot of startups which are trying to use hype to promote their products and using machine learning without having any machine learning inside. But I totally agree with Anders that understanding your market and who will be the users, this is a priority, and starting essentially discussions with them from the very beginning to define the features of the product. The second aspect is, can you build a minimal viable product within 6 months? Do I have enough data? Do I have customer requirements specified? If not, do I have enough funding to essentially go through longer period? For instance, I mean, I totally agree with Klas that medtech and health startups are super nice and the future looks bright, but it takes 2-3 years before those startups come to the market. So it's not for everyone to drive those startups. You need to have a lot of funding. Yeah. So just being a bit more pragmatic on the funding and listening to your users and customers from the start.
And if we follow that path a bit and include a user question, so what are the problems that have emerged from the last year and problems and opportunities maybe from the hyper digitalization we've seen and the COVID crisis and other health related issues? So do you see any big opportunities now because of the COVID situation we've been through? If we start with Valeriya.
Yeah. I believe that there is a kind of shifts of some areas which could bring much more profits and develop faster. So everything which is now home-based, remote-based, like e-learning and education, because now we don't have an access to teachers or coaches in an easy way. So can we do AI-based education platform? Wellness and fitness, now we are training at home. Can we have an online coach? So for instance, there are platforms like Entire Body, which delivers online coach and nutrition experts to you via the app. HR and hiring distantly, again, working with the teams, how can we not forget of upskilling and reskilling employees, and how can we hire distantly when people. So all of this kind of distant interaction is getting more and more hype right now. Yeah.
So, and Klas, I know that you're a experienced wrestler. So do you have a AI wrestling coach at home?
No, but actually AI can be used. I don't know if it's used in wrestling, but in sports to everything from to track where your limbs are to also to I mean, you also could have a lot of data in sports. So it is of course used in sports, but I'm not using this in my local wrestling club. No.
But do you see opportunities for startups in that area?
In the wrestling area, I think it's hard, but in general, Morten, I know we have been pointing to very interesting topics, and of course, Corona made us kind of digitalized a lot very fast, and I think the points from Valeriya is completely true, and also you see. And you see all these crazy things that are emerging when you're only watching people in 2D. So it's not only the kind of wise things that will explode, but it's also the funny things. You need some entertainment, right? Making you have funny ears would be a great tool, Morten, for example.
Right. So yes, we need some entertainment, and we still haven't seen AI produce humor, at least very not intentional humor. But so that could be one of the comings for 2021, maybe. And what about you, Anders? I hear that some of the audience here are struggling with finding skilled AI co-founders. Is this something that you could help with? Do you know some skilled AI co-founders, or how would you suggest people go abroad finding them?
Yeah, it's a challenge that Daniel is pulling out here, and if you look sort of systematically at why do we struggle to build really these huge tech successes in Norway compared with some other sort of countries that are comparable, right? Like look to Sweden, for example. Of course, it's a bit of a drag on our development that we don't have these things, but I think that more and more companies like strategy houses and those kind of things, they're sort of building these investment companies related to their consulting business, which to some extent can alleviate this. But what we really need more of, and it's a bit of a stupid answer, I guess, but we need people to succeed and sell stuff for a few billion kroner, and then get a new cabin and a new nice home, and still have $500 million that they can play around with and invest in new things, because then we sort of the ball is going to roll, right? So I think that we are seeing some Norwegian companies succeeding globally, and then people sort of becoming angel investors in that way, but it's taking too long, and I don't really have a proper answer to it. So, but if I could make just a small comment to what Valeriya said on because I think this sort of home focused on home kind of business market is obviously a big so responder to the COVID situation. But I think one thing that will be huge as well is sort of the backside of us ordering everything from home and getting it sent, right? Is that it's a problem with buying things and throwing it away. It's not as circular as it maybe it used to be, and I think people generally are less keen on buying really expensive quality when they can't go to a store and sort of look and feel at it. So finding a way of sort of solving circularity when we shop from home, I think that's a pretty big topic that will need more attention in the years to come.
And that probably includes not only the field of AI, but some psychology, I would expect. I feel different when I buy something online anonymously versus at the store. Maybe I buy other products, I'm not sure. But and let's continue a bit. What about Valeriya? Would you see there's a difference between the development life cycle in an AI-based product versus a non-AI-based? Is that the same, or is it completely different?
I would say in the bigger picture, it definitely looks the same, but of course you need a slightly different team. You need a team consisting of data engineers, data scientists. You need an access to the data. But all of the development rules of defined success metrics, benchmark, tests is something which is quite standard to the software development cycle. So there are differences and similarities, but access to the data, understanding the problem, and essentially availability of data scientists are the most important things in AI project.
So yes, that makes a lot of sense. And access to data is something that we've talked a lot about. And Klas, you mentioned that briefly. Access to data is something that is important for 2021. So how do you see the data sharing world? Let's maybe 2021 but even further, maybe beyond health. Yes.
Yeah, this is important, of course, for AI. And if you go to health first, Norway has a lot of health data. We have now started a project called Helseanalyseplattformen, where this data should be more available, both for research, but also in the long run for developing industry around this. So the health industry is, of course, or AI in general needs data. So creating these databases, sharing data. Simula is great. You had a great research webinar last Friday with Mikael Riegler, and they share all the data they use and anonymize it and share it. And this is kind of the way not only to progress in research, but also to making tools so that startups and other companies could use this data to develop their tools. And I think this is partly what NORA wants to do, to kind of make this ecosystem and infrastructure to help also together with Sintef and everyone. We for example, we need a national infrastructure for computing and for machine learning. We need, NORA will also try to, we will establish a research school and to connect these parts to also NORA.startup, of course, to connect NORA startup companies with the investors, with researchers, with students, and to create this vibrant environment and ecosystem. That is kind of important, and I think this is what is needed in Norway.
Right. And that is, maybe it's similar to one of the audience members who talked about AI.se, which is a Sweden initiative, and these hackathons all over the country in Netherlands on the chameleon challenge, meaning on doing pathological or at least cancer detection from images and these type of things. And we could maybe use some of that also in Norway, and maybe NORA could be the initiator of some of these type of hackathons and challenges. Right. So if you then, at least Anders mostly, but the others also talked about challenges that were not directly connected to economy. You talked about environmentally friendly systems, energy saving, etc. So how do you see that as a startup opportunity? So if I want to make a startup and I say I want to save the world, make it a bit more environmentally friendly, and it's a bit hard to make money directly from that. So where should I get that type of funding, Anders?
I think, well, this might be a little bit colored by my own background, but I think that if you look at like the Norwegian industry, right, with a lot of primary natural resource kind of work, it's a lot of big players that is definitely not data and AI first, right? It's huge players that see that they need to change, they need to renew their business, but what they're really good at is like pipelines and wires, right? So I think that for startups, it's a potential in forming really good and meaningful relationships with existing industry, and that can. It's a bit of a special situation with Cognite, right? So I'm not saying that everyone can do that since they have the ownership structure that they have, but finding a really good customer that you can grow with and sort of be the AI friend of this one, I think that's a very good start. And also, as I briefly mentioned, both on the EU and the national side, it's huge programs coming. If you look at the Green Deal package from EU, it's massive investments that are happening. So sort of tying into those kind of things, it's fairly easy to get a lot of say good wind on tailwind to get moving. And personally, I think it's easier to make a business model work in a B2B kind of world than in a B2C kind of world. But obviously there are exceptions to that.
Yeah. So it's easier in a business to business than a business to customer. Do you see the same way, Valeriya? Is it easier to make a AI company in a business to business than in a business to customer? Or is it the same?
I would say that business to business is more demanding unless you have a direct buyer or essentially business who will utilize it and you have an agreement with them that they will use it. I mean, there are more customers than businesses, I would say. So yeah, I would say B2C seems to be like an easy challenge than B2B, but I hope that B2B will be developed in faster.
I guess there are opportunities for both. So if you have a good B2B idea and if you have a good B2C idea, the world is open. But an interesting question that has come up is also related to software development. If if you think this randomness or stochasticness of AI, it makes different mistakes than traditional software. So is that something that we should consider differently? If we took Valeriya first there.
I mean, I don't fully understand this question, because if we are thinking about scientific computing or mathematical models or physical models, there is a stochastic nature in them as well, because you don't account for all the parts of the nature. So there is always some kind of either computational error or modeling error, or some kind of stochasticity in many models we are trying to program. So definitely there is mistakes which can produce, and that's why you start with defining what's your assessment criteria and what's your acceptance criteria, and definitely have a clear validation database data sets separated from training and testing data sets. Those are practices which are well written. Yeah,
and those are well known in the research field at least. So what do you think, Klas?
Yeah, when I'm talking about errors and mistakes, an interesting thing is especially in healthcare again, is the different mistakes that AI do compared to humans. So, for example, in radiology, finding cancer in images, for example, of course, AI do mistakes and radiologists do mistakes, but they typically often do different mistakes. So at least at this time, the kind of combination of the radiologist using AI is kind of the best thing. And we will see in the future. Of course, this was also what we said with the Deep Blue and these chess computers, that they are best when they're used together with the humans. But now the humans are kind of out of the loop. And again, because of deep learning and reinforcement learning and AlphaZero, especially in chess.
Absolutely. So let's try to round off a bit. We're running out of time. But if you, Klas, could say if there are any good corporate accelerator programs for AI startups or something that NORA could facilitate? Or is there any good corporate accelerator programs for AI startups that you know about?
Yeah, I mean, NORA.startup is about this. So connecting, if you have a startup within and especially if you're a research-based startup, then you have a lot of possibilities to and also apply for a combination of research and startup. You have a lot of applications now, so just contact us.
Absolutely. So NORA.startup is exactly the accelerator program that you're looking for, whoever asked that in the question. So Anders, if you look at NORA.startup 5 years from now, how would that best help you and your world and startups you work with?
I think Klas pointed to this in a very, very good way earlier. Like what you really want is a vibrant network and ecosystem, right? Because I think we all bring different strengths to the table, and as long as we are open and sort of work together and contribute, I think that's the best way forward. So yeah, I'll just latch on to that. Keeping things open, keeping sort of vibrant area. Another thing to look at it is like Startup Lab, right? Where you've been able to bring both sort of the startup environment together with a lot of other things co-located. It's super good. So having maybe even more collaboration between accelerators would be good. Not trying to answer how to do that, but I think, yeah.
Very good answer. And Valeriya, you will have the last word here. So what do you think NORA.startup should best facilitate in a dream scenario for the 10,000 startups that are around the world?
Yeah, and I totally agree with Anders and Klas that vibrant ecosystem. I think it's also important to educate students or young people in essentially having more entrepreneurial spirit and contribute to the ideas, but at the same time having feasible and realistic ideas rather than trying to sell something without any ground. So yeah, education, ecosystem, everything which helps to promote the entrepreneurship and make it much easier for people to start new companies.
Absolutely. So that sounds very good, because I know that a lot of the listeners here are from universities, which education is of course very important, and facilitating startups is something that NORA is supposed to do. So if you're interested more in NORA startup, please go to the NORA website. If you want to get help on getting into the AI field from a startup, or if you're thinking that you want to innovate as a researcher, NORA startup is the place for you. So this concludes today's webinar, and I'd like to give thank you to Klas Pettersen, who is the CEO of NORA, Valeriya from Simula, and Anders from Sintef. So please tune in again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.